take this meeting live in just about 10 seconds. I will turn it over to Megan and we can start the meeting in about 10 seconds.
All right. How about give me another TV tray?
Megan, you're all set.
Okay, thanks, Jared. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us tonight. This is the 6th and final virtual public outreach meeting held as part of the Binghamton Police Reform and Reinvention Collaborative. My name is Megan Brockett. I work in Mayor Rich David's office as Assistant for Neighborhood and Youth Affairs, and I'll be serving as the moderator for tonight's meeting. The collaborative has held 5 prior public outreach meetings to collect input from various stakeholders, ranging from members of the local faith community to business organizations and neighborhood groups and others, regarding improvements or reforms to the Binghamton Police Department. The purpose of tonight's open public meeting is to solicit input from members of the broader community. As a member of the Collaborative Steering Committee, my role tonight is limited to ensuring that everyone who has registered for this meeting has an opportunity to speak. As you can see on your screens, we are joined again tonight by several members of the steering committee, including Mayor Rich David, Binghamton Police Chief Joe Zakuski, District Attorney Mike Korchak, and Public Defender Mike Baker, along with several other members of the committee. Thank you all for joining us again tonight. This meeting, as I said, is about hearing directly from community members on ways the police department can better serve the city's diverse community, improve public safety, implement 21st century policing strategies, strengthen relationships and trust, and address the disparities that affect communities of color. Your input is necessary to reach these goals as outlined in Governor Cuomo's executive order. As a reminder, the city has selected the Finn Institute for Public Safety to serve as an independent research partner in this effort. Finn is charged with collecting and tracking public input and themes during these outreach meetings and surveying stakeholders for additional input. They'll be reviewing a video copy of tonight's meeting. As an FYI, earlier today, a community survey developed by Finn for this collaborative was posted on the city website. It's another important opportunity for the public to voice their input on policing and public safety matters in Binghamton. You can find a link to the survey on the collaborative page of the city website. That's also been emailed directly to all steering committee members. So we're hopeful that you will all share it with your neighbors and your networks and respond to it yourselves. And the deadline for that response is March 1st. So tonight we have almost 20 people signed up to provide comment. And on behalf of the steering committee, I just want to thank all of you for taking the time to be here tonight to make your voice heard on this topic. Your participation is important and we really appreciate you being here. In order to make sure everyone has a chance to speak, I'll make my way down our list of registered participants, turning the floor over to each of you one by one for up to 5 minutes. When your name is called, please unmute yourself, introduce yourself to the group, and tell us whatever you would like to share as part of the record for this meeting. We want to hear your experiences, thoughts, concerns, and ideas for improving policing in our community. This is a listening session, not a Q&A or a panel discussion. For each speaker, I'll start the 5-minute timer when your input begins and let you know when we reach the time limit. At that point, please wrap up your comments so we can move on to the next person. If by chance we hit the 5-minute limit and you haven't had a chance to give your entire testimony, please feel free to email it to the Binghamton Collaborative. That email address is bpdcollaborative@cityofbinghamton.com. We'll make sure it gets shared with all the steering committee members and included as part of the official record. After tonight's meeting, the steering committee may wish to follow up with you for additional input or questions. Again, all of this information is part of the community input record that will be included in the Finn Institute's compilation of public comment. So our first speaker tonight, and we'll turn the floor over to you. I'll start the timer. Our first speaker tonight is Jill Schultz. Jill, the floor is yours.
Hi, I'm Jill Schultz. I've lived on the East Side for nearly 20 years. I want this reform to succeed, but I'm wary. It's not that I doubt the sincerity or the commitment of the collaborative members. It's the process that's flawed. 2 months is not enough time to gather significant public comment and develop a plan. Another reason why I distrust this process happened yesterday when Mayor David announced the expansion of the Southern Tier Crime Analysis Center. Its staff is going to be tripled. It's supposed to be providing enhanced policing through the use of technology and crime data analysis. I wonder if that includes facial recognition technology, which has a significantly higher failure rate for women and for people of color. If public input really mattered in this process, the mayor would not be making such substantive changes to policing before the collaborative even held its first public meeting. I believe that a good reform process should build on the efforts that preceded it. Some of that history has been recounted in the Dayrock letter, which has been signed by 233 people as of yesterday. So I would very much like the collaborative to take that letter seriously. Please review the police modernization law that was proposed in 2015. Over 700 Binghamton residents discussed police reform at a year-long series of public meetings. Those ideas are summarized in the Dayrock letter. One of the other reasons why I want you to really focus on that letter is because it gives voice to so many more members of our community. So far, from what I've seen from these meetings, the sample is far too small and it's demographically skewed. The Dayrock letter proposes 5 categories for reform that could serve as the outline for our plan. We want the department to eliminate racial profiling, to increase transparency and accountability, to eliminate militarization, to minimize physical harm and the unnecessary use of force, and to reinvest in our community. It's our money. We'd like to have a say in how it gets spent to try to take care of us. In addition to the new policies and regulations that we would need to implement these reforms, we need to change the culture of the Binghamton Police Department. Many of the previous speakers shared stories describing the kinds of attitudes that contribute to the problems we've been discussing. We can't fix that with regulations alone. We have a good blueprint for reform in the Dayrock letter. I urge you to use it as the basis for our plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Our next speaker tonight is April Bellin. April, I'll start the timer. We have you on mute, April.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Shania McCree was a very dedicated person. This was a teacher. She was a motivational speaker. She empowered a lot of women out here. It went from a situation of her car being vandalized to her now ending up in jail and going to serve 3.5 to 7 years for something that I feel like the police did not take proper procedures to handle. Nor did the judge or the lawyers. I feel like a lot of things should change inside of this situation. Also inside of the jails. Inside of the jails, they have cold water. They've been having cold water for the past two to 3 weeks. A lot of the inmates are not getting their religious value, which is actually religious persecution if you don't give them what they deserve. And it is inside of your policy to give them their religious values. The way that the police officers talk to the women inside there is degrading, it's depressing, it's something you do not do when they're already in a bad situation. This could be something, jail could be something to help change a person, or it can break a person. And inside of Binghamton, for correctional facility, it's nothing but breaking people. I've seen a lot of women go in and they break immediately. Shania McCree is one of those women. Also, she is a 4-time breast cancer survivor. She has stomach ulcers. She has bronchitis and asthma. For the simple charge that she has, which is a nonviolent, I don't believe that she should still be in jail and actually going to prison, where they have limitations of a lot of health products inside of the prisons, like soap. They don't have a lot of stuff for ulcers, gastric ulcers to be exact. So people are getting sick, and I believe this could be something that will hinder her in the long run. I feel like nothing was done properly. None of the process was done properly. I actually was there to witness everything and to see that these police officers took the process the way they did and was so nonchalant about it. It was very disgusting. And I believe that a lot needs to change, and a lot of programs needs to come to the inmates that are inside of these jails. Instead of waiting till they get all the way to prison and they actually have to reach that state they should be able to have some type of help here. It's no type of programs for people here. So these people have to sit here until they can go to prison and actually receive help, which is not fair. Because if you were innocent in the beginning, but had a judge that was racist, disrespectful, I have a cop that's not trying to tell the truth, it enters you in this situation where now you're guilty and you could be facing time inside of prison. I feel like that's not fair for her. And I feel like it's not fair for many other women that are inside of these jails right now. And I feel like it needs to be more justice when it comes to the African-American women and the African-American state itself. People don't see what happens to African-Americans inside of these police departments and inside of these correctional facilities. They get treated like slaves. They get disrespected. And she's one of them that are getting religious persecuted for something that she loves the most. And I feel like that is wrong. But thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, April, and thank you for submitting your written comment. We've received that. We'll make sure it's included too as part of the public record. Thank you. Okay, next up on our list, we have Marilyn McCall. Marilyn, are you here with us?
Yes.
Okay, great. I will start the timer and the floor is yours.
I really haven't seen what Binghamton is proposing as a reform. This is my first meeting, but I did see Broome County's sheriff's reform package. I don't see anything in there on retraining the officers. They need empathy training. They need to learn to feel how other people feel, whether they're Black, whether they're old, whether they're mentally or physically disabled. And the only way they're going to get that is through classes. And frankly, I see all these, the reforms are, oh, we'll set up a committee so we have more participants from the disadvantaged joining our forces. What's that? Yeah, it's nothing. They need some retraining. And basically that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Marilyn, for your time tonight and for being here. We appreciate it. Next up on our list, we have Janet McHenry. I'm not sure if I see Janet on our screen here. I don't think so. So we'll come back to her. How about Dr. Sarah Girk? Dr. Girk, are you with us?
Hi. Hi, I'm Sarah Girk. I'm sorry, I'm sitting here. It's the Mac and Cheese Fest at the Binghamton Philharmonic tonight, and I have I'm surrounded by mac and cheese and eating my dinner. But I don't have too much to say at the moment, but I do want to share my concerns about this process. This process was enacted by Andrew Cuomo as an act of, and my understanding of what this should be is focused on conversations around how we can do better and improve relationships between the Binghamton Police Department and people who are historically brutalized by police forces. And there's so much scientific evidence at this point. There's so much research that shows what happens broadly in the United States, the trends broadly in the United States, and some people locally have done an awful lot to illuminate specific situations here in Binghamton. And I have been listening into some of these sessions. I've been trying to chart the progress of this particular project. And I'm not seeing enough engagement with the right people. I'm not seeing enough support for proven methods to improve relationships and to reduce police brutality in this area. And I'm just very disappointed in the selection of the committee, in and in the proceedings thus far. And I think that we can do better as a community. And I hope that we find a way to establish some programs that can lead to real change in the lives of the most vulnerable people in our community. That's about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Dirk. Next on our list, we have Kathy Staples.
Hi, my name is Kathy and I'm a resident of the city of Binghamton. I live in a poor neighborhood downtown. I work and volunteer my little free time in the city and have noted the resistance to change even being offered by some people on this committee. When the governor called for a plan, you resisted, but here we are. Reinvest in our community. With 12 additional police officers hired, we could have invested $1.2 million per year in our community. We could hire mental health response teams with qualified professionals, could have funded a youth center where our kids could be safe and move forward in the community they grew up in. We could have given students internet access to learn from home during a pandemic, provide food for families through the Farm Share program, open a harm reduction counseling center. These are all programs that show direct and real results. All of these meetings and speaking will do nothing if the people on the other end do not open their minds and hear their neighbors. The groups that continue to speak at these meetings, regardless of the feelings of speaking to the wall, our community you should want to see. These are the people who show up and speak for the many people in our community who don't feel connected or valued. We work here, we pay rent, own homes, shop in stores and work in those stores. A small group that does shows up in spite of the feeling nothing will change. This is the exact moment in time that change is not only necessary, but required. We don't need another damn tank.
Kathy, thank you. Thanks for being here and for your participation tonight. Next on our list of speakers is Robin Alpaugh. Robin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Megan. I hadn't planned on speaking, but I wanted to say that I'm happy to have been able to sit in on one of these prior conversations. And I can just say, personally that my experiences with the police have only been positive. I've never had a bad experience, and I have had some interaction with problems in the neighborhood, and it's never been anything but positive and immediate action. So are there problems out there? Sure. But I think, this is a great and positive way that we can come together and address them as we are to make our community better all around. So thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Next on our list of speakers, Tina Chronopoulos. Tina, the floor is yours.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, awesome. Give me just 1 second. All right, I'm ready to roll. My name is Tina Chronopoulos. My pronouns are she, hers. For those who are listening, it's important you know that I am white. I have lived and worked in Binghamton for 10.5 years and have been deeply involved with the community since I arrived here. I volunteered for 5 years with Identity Youth Center and also served on the staff board for 6 years. Most recently, I've been involved with Just's visiting program until COVID put an end to in-person visits at the Broome County Jail. I'm so honored and proud to be part of this awesome group of folks who have already gone ahead of me and who've said many, many things that I absolutely agree with. You all rock and you give me hope for a future in which Black, Indigenous, and people of color can walk around without fear for their lives. It would be remiss of me not to mention that I speak to you from the unjustly appropriated lands of the nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and Lenni Lenape. It is imperative that we acknowledge that the wealth of the USA was founded on chattel slavery and the genocide of and appropriation of land from Indigenous nations. If you read the executive order, it very clearly says that Black lives matter. It very clearly asks the community to come together to imagine a policing practice for itself that results in improved policies and transparency to reduce any racial disparities in policing. The use of force policy of the Binghamton Police Department includes a provision mandating that the data be analyzed to determine if there are any particular trends. The one trend I see looking at all age groups is a clear example, and a clear example of racial disparity is that the use of force is disproportionately applied to Black folks. On average, for the years 2015 to 2019, 44% of use of force applications happened to white people, while 49% happened to Black people. This is completely out of whack in a city where 12% of residents are Black. I note with interest that Mayor David put out a press release on June 10th, 2020, in which he claimed that the BPD's use of force policy includes a ban on chokeholds and neck restraints. Unless I am mistaken, page 9 of the policy currently online does not explicitly ban chokeholds or neck restraints. So it might be worth revisiting the policy, otherwise the mayor's statement looks like misinformation unless he didn't mean to include a ban. Part of this process should include consideration of foundational issues and areas where we can intervene before someone comes into contact with the police. According to data available from the US Census website, Binghamton is the poorest city in the entire state of New York. Relatively to its population, Binghamton is poorer even than Buffalo, Jamestown, Syracuse, Rochester, and Utica. 2/3 of those living in poverty are working poor, people who work 2 jobs to make ends meet in a country where wages have been stagnant while the cost of living has gone up. They have been left behind by the system. I see this as a failure in leadership and vision of our locally elected officials over decades who have been unwilling to deal with these issues, blaming them instead on individuals whom they see as lazy or coming here to get a free ride, which is a rhetorical, divisive, and often tacitly racist tactic. Binghamton lacks quality, affordable housing, robust social services like daycare, adequate provision for those who suffer from mental health or substance abuse disorders, and so on. Yet the city is willing to renovate the tennis courts at Rec Park to the tune of $1.5 million during a pandemic, when people in the city are hungry and live in cockroach-infested apartments that belong to locally known slumlords. Our elected leaders have contributed to this problem by allocating money to law enforcement and underfunding services that would tackle some of these issues, with the concomitant result that the police have essentially become a dumping ground for issues that they are not equipped to deal with. I'd like the committee to consider banning no-knock search warrants, stopping the practice of sending police along with ambulances after someone has been given Narcan. A person in this situation does not need to be cuffed, tackled, or arrested. They need medical care. Making racial profiling by law enforcement illegal and regularly posting demographic data relating to law enforcement activities. Reallocating a portion of the police budget to fund youth programs, subsidized housing, homeless shelters, and re-entry programs. Some of that money could also be used to create a non-emergency phone service, to develop a citizen response team, and to hire mental health and substance abuse disorder specialists who are not subordinate to the BPD. Finally, as someone who is queer and who has family members, friends, and students who are trans, I want to uplift Bob Egan's suggestion that the BPD consider adopting a policy that regulates the police's interactions with trans people. It is good to see the BPD reform webpage gradually being populated with information on the department's operations. A complaints procedure is still missing. I am glad you have finally made a community survey available and hope you will publicize it via print and radio. Having said that, I am dismayed that the deadline is the 1st of March. I urge you to allocate more time for community input and participation in future endeavors, especially since not everyone has internet at home. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. And please feel free to send in your written testimony. If we cut you off there, we'll share it with the rest of the steering committee and for the record. Next up, Councilwoman Aviva Friedman. Councilwoman, the floor is yours. Aviva, did we lose you?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, great. I'm calling in on my phone, so there's like 3 different mute buttons I have to press.
Sure.
All right. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Aviva Friedman, and I am the City Council representative for District 4, which encompasses downtown and the north side of Binghamton. Problems with the police are not an issue of good apples or bad apples, but rather the location of the apple tree. What I mean is, it's the situations where we decide police are necessary by definition of their job. Police are required to respond to all sorts of emergency calls, even if the situation would be better served by a different professional. Many times, situations are automatically escalated by the presence of a police officer, even if that officer is professional, respectful, and follows protocols to a T. In my reimagining of policing and community safety, I picture decoupling police from nonviolent, non-threatening public safety situations. We've heard from a multitude of community members who have posited that a mental health crisis or drug overdose, for example, would fall under this umbrella. And I'd like to propose an additional facet of policing, which I don't believe has yet been addressed: traffic monitoring. In an article entitled "What Traffic Enforcement Without Police Could Look Like," published last month on The Appeal, Meg O'Connor writes, quote, in an article in Stanford Law Review, Jordan Blair Woods, a criminologist and legal scholar at the University of Arkansas School of Law, puts forth a framework for how local governments can disentangle traffic enforcement from the police department. Under the framework, local governments would reassign most traffic enforcement to separate traffic agencies that are independent from the police department. The agencies would employ unarmed monitors to enforce traffic laws, though exceptions would be made for violations that involve certain crimes that police would still investigate, like hit and runs or driving a stolen vehicle. Traffic agencies would also handle any automated traffic enforcement, taking the responsibility to review red light cameras and issue tickets away from the police, end quote. Berkeley, California has already put forth a proposal to implement a program like this. Binghamton could do just the same. Quoting O'Connor again, Black drivers are 20% more likely to be stopped than white drivers and as much as twice as likely to be searched, according to a study of 100 million traffic stops conducted by the Stanford Open Policing Project. And 11% of all fatal shootings by police in 2015 occurred during traffic stops, according to a Washington Post database of police killings, end quote. This is a clear situation where an armed police officer would not be necessary to respond, and the job could be effectively filled by another unarmed employee. I would also be remiss if I didn't voice my frustration and anger at the process implemented in this collaborative. I'm angered at the implication that grassroots groups who have worked for months to collect community input about community safety reimagination are called hate groups in order to discredit the valuable work that they are doing. What do they allegedly hate? Police brutality, racism, having months of planning, preparation, and execution of exactly what Governor Cuomo is calling for in these collaboratives be disregarded? Because I hate that too. According to the FBI, a hate group's primary purpose is to promote animosity, hostility, and malice against persons belonging to a race, religion, disability, sexual orientation, or ethnicity/national origin, which differs from that of the members of the organization. It is not only irresponsible, but incorrect and dangerous to conflate a group of community members who are soliciting public input about community safety with a hate group. Imagine a forum on accessibility where people who use wheelchairs attest to a lack of elevators or ramps, and deaf folks requested sign language interpreters, and blind folks asked for Braille signs. Imagine further that able-bodied folks came to the forum to give testimonies about how easy it is to walk into the building, how they can hear the lectures just fine, and how the signage in the building is nice and clear. That would be ridiculous. The addition of ramps, interpreters, and Braille makes that building more accessible to those who need it and continues to function just the same for those who do not. This is what we are doing right now by speaking over those who are desperately advocating for change. Why are we considering the voices of those for whom the police department works just fine when we should instead be heeding the solutions proposed by those for whom it does not? I would also like to add that I see multiple comments of people who didn't realize that they had to register for this event, and I was wondering if we could make time for people who were under the impression that this was a public comment session. So I just would like to request that if that's possible. And I will link the article that I quoted in the chat box. Thank you.
Thank you, Council. And if you could just submit written testimony, if you have that, to the BPD collaborative, that would be appreciated. Next on our list, Brenda Brown. Brenda, the floor is yours. I think we have you on mute, Brenda. We can circle back if you want us to do that. Okay, so we'll circle back to Brenda. Next up on our list is Alexis Plus. Alexis?
There we go. Thank you very much. I have already shared Truth Farm's position on this, so I'm coming tonight to tell a personal story to demonstrate the racism within Binghamton policing. We at Truth Farm host an annual event called the Trail of Truth to memorialize those lost to substance use. This is an event that the mayor used to sponsor through a significant donation from the city, that is, until he started calling us a hate group because we stand for Black Lives Matter. But that's beside the point. Hundreds of people attend the Trail of Truth each year, and we march from the Martin Luther King promenade to the governmental complex. One year, a police car showed up at the end of the Wall Street, sort of kind of watching over our gathering, I suppose. This made people there feel really uncomfortable because many people who suffer from substance use disorder have had negative experiences with policing. So I walked down and I asked the officer if he would leave, to which he replied, no problem. It was as simple as that. But then again, I'm a middle-aged white lady and policing usually goes like that for me. Fast forward to this summer when multiple Black Lives Matter rallies were held, which I also attended. Suddenly, even with rallies smaller than our Trail of Truth, there were countless police officers. Not friendly, not no problem at all, ma'am, we'll leave, but intimidating, armed, frequently dressed in riot gear police officers. The hate and anger that came out of our community over people standing up to say Black Lives Matter was so upsetting. And unfortunately, our elected officials and the show of police force simply added fuel to that fire by causing the community to believe they should fear those rallies. Just before one of the events, one of our rainmakers had a note pinned to their door stating that people who attended the rally would be shot. As we prepared to go to the event, we were all very concerned for ours and everyone else's safety. Leading up to the rally, online, openly on news stories, and even during the rally, commenters online threatened to come to the rally and open fire. At one of the events, a truck revved its engine and sped towards the crowd. For one rally in particular, when I was going to the rally, literally in fear for myself and everyone who was attending, I kissed my partner goodbye and wondered if I'd see him again. I texted my kids to tell them I loved them on the way there because I knew in reality some of us might not survive. I feared for what some angry community member about us calling it for an end to racism might do to us. When we got there, there were about 60 officers armed in riot gear lined up along the governmental plaza. There were countless officers in vehicles at multiple intersections outside of the immediate rally area as well. But they weren't there in response to the death threats towards us. They weren't there to protect us in any way. They were there in response to us. They were there to intimidate us. Even though we were the ones who had death threats hurled at us, they were there to stand against us saying that Black lives mattered. Why? Why is it that the police were more concerned about people raising their voices to say that Black lives matter than they were concerned about the death threats from community members towards us? I realized that day that that was the only time I have ever feared police. It was when I stood up to say that Black lives matter. I find it startlingly curious that in May of the same year, dozens of protesters planned a rally at the governmental plaza to protest having to wear masks during COVID. These protesters even openly encouraged each other to come armed. What's really fascinating is there was no police presence at that protest. No police in riot gear, no tanks, no officers protecting the building. This is so reminiscent of the difference between the difference that we saw in Washington, D.C. between the response to Black Lives Matter protests and the Trump supporters storming the Capitol with weapons who even beat and killed officers. it would seem that our elected officials, Binghamton policies, and policing are all deeply committed to maintaining not only their own racism, but the racism that exists in our community. And we all see it plain as day. Yesterday, I wanted to give up. I wanted to stop raising my voice. I wanted to stop speaking up, because here we are in the midst of this collaborative. I'm almost done. Where countless community members have been raising their voice. We need less money in policing and more money invested in community-based organizations, where countless community members mention substance use and substance use disorders being the biggest concern in our community. Truth Farm, who specializes in providing care for people who suffer from substance use disorder, this past week received a notification that we were denied 4 grant applications that we submitted to the city to provide funding to help people in the city of Binghamton with substance use disorder. All 4 of our proposals were denied. And then yesterday, I watched a press conference where the mayor announced the construction of the crime analysis lab in the tripling of staff.
Alexis, I'm going to have to ask you to
This collaborative.
Okay, so we just have the timer go off. We have to move on to the next speaker so that we can make sure everyone who signed up to speak tonight gets an opportunity to speak. If you have a written comment, please send it to the BPD collaborative email. We will make sure in full it gets shared with all committee members and is included as part of the public record. In the interest of time, we're going to move on to the next speaker, and that is Nathan Hotchkiss. Nathan, are you still here with us?
Yeah,
Brenda
I'm here.
is here.
I think, can you have Brenda take my spot because she was in line before me?
Okay, thanks, Nathan. Brenda, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Brenda Brown. And for the last 44 years, we've been doing Black History Month in the community. Black History in the community annually at the Broome County Public Library. Every year, I try to make a point of inviting law officials, the police, the sheriff, because I think it's important for the police to come together when we have events like this so that the public can see you outside of your role. They can see you as coming together, joining with the community as a united front. So I look forward to continued support, but I also want to remind law enforcement that where we started from, where we were united, every year, for the last 5 years, I've started seeing a decline in participation. And I think it is so important for the police to come out, for the mayor to come out, so that once again, we can see a positive force of where we all come together. And I'm looking forward. This year, we were virtual. Next year, hopefully, we will be back in the library. And I want you to hear my voice when I say, I would like for us to come together as a united, positive front.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Brenda. Thanks for being here tonight and for sharing. We appreciate it. Nathan, if you're ready, we'll go back to you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Nate Hotchkiss. I'm a resident on the west side. I don't think there's much I can add to the suggestions that have already been made in terms of reform. So I wanted to take my time to mainly just comment on the process that the city has started with. I've observed all the public meetings thus far, and it's become very clear to me that all the individuals viewing and participating in these meetings have viewed this as the beginning of a conversation about police reform. While there have been a lot of great suggestions and many have expressed that they were there to learn and engage and assist in the process of reimagining our police, and I would love to see that happen. I'd love to see the community have a stake in this process, but this being the last opportunity for public comment, I think that's a very limited opportunity. So at the end of this meeting, there'll be 6 weeks left before the city has to submit their police reform plan to the state. And there isn't a public outline that has been given to us as to what the following weeks should entail or will entail for the collaborative, but potentially this gives you 2 weeks to analyze all the statements from these meetings. You have 2 weeks to draft a proposal and make it public. And then you have another 2 weeks to revise that and submit it. So given that extremely crunched timeline, I don't think there's any way that anyone could produce a satisfying plan for this reform. So I'd suggest if the mayor and the steering committee want to really do this process justice, it's essential for them to create a provision to add to the plan that's being submitted on April 1st that would allow the steering committee to continue for another 6 months. The 6 months is due to the 6 months that have been lost to inaction by the mayor's office and the steering committee when the executive order was first enacted in June. Maybe with 6 more months, this will allow for enough feedback from the community and give us an opportunity to really iron out some of the necessary details of a reform plan. I hope to see this process continue and build and evolve and have feedback and a lot of community involvement. So thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Nate. Next on our list is Mary Webster. Mary, the floor is yours. Well, we have you on mute here, Mary. If you could just go ahead and unmute yourself.
All right.
Perfect, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mary Webster, and I live at 12 Edward Street. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this important discussion about police reform and reinvention in Binghamton, and many thanks to the other speakers. I've learned a lot from you. I was thrust into community activism when drug dealing and prostitution overran my neighborhood. I was one of a group of neighbors that got together in a living room on Edward Street on a warm summer evening in 1995 and started to plan safe streets. Our focus was a 20-block area on the west side of Binghamton, now known as North of Main or NOMA, bounded by Front Street to the east and Jarvis Street to the west, north from Main to the railroad tracks. 26 years later, and we are still going strong, now working in collaboration with an outstanding group of organizations dedicated to repairing the social fabric of our community. Recently, we opened a community center at 85 Walnut Street, a dream of ours for years, which serves the residents of NOMA and beyond. And I invite you all to pay us a visit there and see what we do there. It's amazing. As head of Safe Streets, I've always maintained a close relationship with members of the Binghamton Police Department and have been grateful for their service. In the late 1990s, we were one of 2 neighborhoods that were lucky enough to participate in a program called BNET, Binghamton Neighborhood Enhancement Team. 2 officers exclusively assigned to our neighborhood patrolled our streets on bicycles. They got to know the residents, young and old. They greeted the kids on their way home from school. And we would sit together on our porch once a week to review recent events. They got to know my dog Zeke so well that they sent me a sympathy card when he died. They attended our monthly meetings and they were always willing to stop and talk to neighbors on the street and hear their concerns. They were stunning ambassadors for the Binghamton Police Department, and their presence made a radical improvement in our neighborhood. We were devastated when the decision was made to end that program. Statistics show that crime has risen in Binghamton since the 1990s. Back then, the people who lived on the street were the eyes and ears of the neighborhood. But many of those homeowners have died or moved away, and the new owners are frequently out-of-town landlords who couldn't care less about fostering community, couldn't care less about who lives in their crowded and deteriorated buildings as long as the tenants pay the rent. Police play a central role in the effort to achieve set social order. And we all know that the most vulnerable among us are the most hurt by the absence of that essential order. Several years ago, the principal of our local elementary school came to a Safe Streets meeting and asked for help. He told us that the kids from our neighborhood had the worst grades, the highest absentee level, and the most serious behavioral problems at the school. It is no secret that kids learn better in a safe and secure environment. As you reinvent the Binghamton Police Department, please consider a 21st century BNet for challenged neighborhoods like mine, in which officers would once again have the opportunity to stop and listen to people's concerns, who would build trust between the police and our citizens, who would show these kids that they are on their side. A BNet made up of officers who would play a vital role in repairing the social fabric of our deprived communities. These days, the police have enough to do in their essential task of responding to criminal activity, but their responsibilities go far beyond that into areas in which they have to get training on the job, like trauma and mental health issues and de-escalation. Far too many people wind up in overcrowded jails instead of being treated at a mental health facility, which is where they really belong. We strongly urge the police department to partner with other entities that have the expertise to deal with these issues and let police focus on their real job, which is fighting crime and keeping us safe. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mary. Next up on our list, Taliba Haley. Ms. Haley, are you here with us? Let's see. Taliba, it looks like you're on mute. I'm not sure if you can unmute yourself or if we're having tech issues. Okay, we did have one member of the steering committee, Chris Perez. Chris is a social worker at the Children's Home, and we introduced him at the last meeting. We were having tech issues, and he didn't get a chance to speak. So I'm going to give Chris the floor now. We'll try to come back to Taliba afterwards. But Chris, right now, thanks for being here, and the floor is yours. I'm still having trouble hearing you, Chris. Are we getting that from the other steering committee members?
Can't hear him.
Yeah,
Joe Burns.
we're still having issues, Chris, and I'm sorry. I know we've been able to hear you at our initial meeting. Okay. Jared, I think Chris is going to call in. I don't know if you're able to. Taliba, if you are still on the line, we can try to circle back to you. Okay, just give us just a minute here, folks. Okay, it looks like we are still having tech issues with Chris, and we may have lost Taliba. Chris, if you want to send in your written comment just the same, and we can connect with you again. I don't think it's on our end, Chris. Okay, hold on just a second. Yeah, I'm sorry, Chris. We're not able to hear you. We can try at a future steering committee meeting, and just submit your comment, and it'll be included as part of the public record. That goes for everyone here tonight. If you didn't get to share your full statement, there were people who didn't register. Those people still have an opportunity to send their statement in to the BPD Collaborative email. So that's bpdcollaborative@cityofbinghamton.com. That email address is going to remain open. There's the public survey that was put online today. Please take the time to fill that out, share it with your networks and your neighbors. We want to encourage as much response to that as possible. So I want to thank everyone who signed up to participate tonight and in the prior stakeholder meetings that we held. As a reminder, all of the public input meetings have been recorded, and they're available online on the City of Binghamton's website under the 2021 Police Reform and Collaborative page. Please remember to fill out that survey if you get a chance. And I want to thank you again all for taking the time to be here with us tonight. We do appreciate it.
Can I ask a question?
Oh.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Councilman Burns.
Yes, thank you. Just wondering now, what is the next step for the steering committee? Now we've done all the listening. Now, what are we going to do to create this plan?
Sure. So it's my understanding, Councilman Burns, that the Fin Institute is responsible for sort of compiling all of the public input, both that we've heard at these stakeholder meetings, at tonight's public open comment meeting, and that we've received into that email address. And we'll reach out to individual steering committee members afterwards to follow up and set up next steps.
So we're not going to meet with as a group with the Fin Institute and discuss, because we did all this listening, and then are we not going to be able to give our opinion?
Megan, I'll jump in here. Councilman Burns, there's going to be another stakeholder meeting next week. We're going to email that information out. We're going to be talking about the next steps. All of that information will be relayed to the public. City Council will have its own public hearing as well. So there are multiple other opportunities for the public to comment. People who were not able to register tonight but still want to comment, as Megan said, there's a survey that was released today. We encourage everybody to take the survey. You can email your written comments. City Council has multiple public comments before this will be voted on. There will be additional stakeholder meetings. After this meeting concludes, there will be an email that was sent out to all the stakeholders. We will be meeting multiple more times. Once the plan is submitted, the public will still have an opportunity to review the plan and comment on it. So there will still be additional periods of time for public comment. That will be communicated to the public as part of the next steps when we send out that to the stakeholders, either by the end of this week or early next week. But the purpose of this meeting tonight is just a public comment. And so Megan, I'm going to turn it back over to you. So we're going to end this portion of the meeting and the stakeholders can look forward to another email. Thank you, Councilman Burns.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And thank you again all for being here with us tonight and for taking